And we're live. Hello all, and welcome back to Sigil Spotlight. My name is always Mr. Harlan, Guthrie, and I'm here once again with the fantastically talented Ellen Abolt. How are you doing, Ellen?
Good, how are you?
Very good. I've done my British announcer voice for some reason. Every once in a while I slip into this mode of hello and welcome. It's because I grew up on all those British announcer TV shows. So it's in my subconscious.
I will do that. I will mimic people's accents. So my dad's boss, once upon a time, was British, and he came over to the U.S. to visit.
He's not anymore?
Well, he's no longer my dad's boss. And so he came over for a dinner party, and without even thinking about it, I accidentally started mimicking his accent.
Oh no!
And I wasn't trying to do it, and I wasn't trying to be offensive or anything like that. And I finally had to stop and apologize. And he was like, "I didn't even notice."
How old were you? Were you were you young enough that it was cute, or were you 25?
I was early high school. So it was okay,
you're on the
fine,
border
high schoolers
there.
are awkward, but it was also kind of what are you doing?
That's great. No, that's perfect. And it's funny. Sometimes it's tough to turn off that switch of mimicking, especially in role-playing. Sometimes you'll be at a table with people doing accents, and you find yourself doing the same act. You're I'm going to sit down I'm going to do a German accent, and someone else starts talking British, and you're like, I'm wondering where we are going to. God damn, I can't.
Yeah, you just sort of, and now we're British. Okay,
yeah,
never
exactly.
mind.
But it's human, and we're all humans. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Sigil Spotlight. We took off last week, a little bit of a break, but we are here, raring to go for the spooky Halloween season. It is, of course, October, and some of the exciting releases that we have that are out and coming are horror themed, I want to say. Sort of adjacent, they are, but they're not exclusively for Halloween. They just happen to be spooky. Am I wrong in saying that? I think that's fair.
No, I think that's pretty fair.
That's pretty fair. And today's guest we have on is a fantastic friend of Sigil, as well as us, Mr. Joe Schnurr. We're going to bring him on in just a second to talk about what's coming up as well. Normally we don't do this. Normally we have our guest segment after the news. But with Joe's sort of foothold in what we're going to be talking about in terms of VTT releases, we just thought, hey, it makes more sense to bring them on at this point. But just before we do that, I do want to mention that if you are looking for something to fill your weeks, every Tuesday night at 7:30 Eastern, I do want to remind you, or mention for the first time, that I am running an RPG on the Sigil stream, this YouTube channel and Twitch channel, called Hereafter: The First Fire. And it is a ongoing D&D 5e. I want to say it's got elements of horror, but it's obviously a straightforward adventure campaign with a wonderful crew: Joe, Ahmed, Gary, Erica, and myself. The makeup is orc, hexblood, tiefling, and half-orc, so it's a very non-traditional party, and they're playing non-traditional characters. But it's been an absolute blast so far, and it is going to lead to much bigger things that are coming through Sigil's pipe. So it's not just a random game. So I highly recommend you check that out every Tuesday night at 7:30 Eastern. You can see the first two videos that have already premiered here on the YouTube channel. Go check them out. They're all under 2 hours, and they are a good time. But without further ado, let us bring on our guest. Please welcome to the stage, the virtual stage, Mr. Joe Schnurr. Am I saying the last name right? I want to make sure.
Yeah, that's right. It's like Schnurr with an N thrown in for good measure.
Sure. That's fantastic. Welcome, Joe. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you? Thanks for having me on.
We're so excited to have you on, and I'm doing great. Ellen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doing good. It's Friday.
I like the
finally.
lamb lamp behind you, by the way. I wanted
Thank
to
you.
I like saying it. Lamb lamp. It gets lost in your mouth a little bit. Lamb lamp. It is Friday, which is the biggest reason why we do this show on a Friday, because we can always say it's Friday, and everyone is excited for Friday. Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Right. No matter how bad it gets, we at least have that going for us, right?
Always have that. Unless you work through the weekend, in which case we apologize in advance. Releases. We have some really exciting stuff coming up, and I figured, I'm just going to throw it to you, Ellen. And Joe, feel free to weigh in as well as Ellen sort of talks about what's coming up. But what's the biggest one? What's the most exciting one that's coming out, Ellen?
So I guess we really have two that are big. So the first one is Blood Drive for for Foundry VTT is released now. That is a Deadlands adventure, and that's the sort of horror, creepy one that Harlan was talking about. It's not really full on horror. I don't have a stomach for horror, and I would absolutely be completely fine playing this. But there is a little creep to it. Is that fair, Joe?
A creep is a good way to put it too.
The beauty of Deadlands as a setting, right, is you can adjust that dial to be as creepy or not creepy as you want, right? So when so it's a cattle drive that has some, weird West elements to it, right? That's the general theme of the adventure. And so depending on how much you want to lean into that, you can make it very, very horror, or you can roll it back and make it more mystery adventure thriller, which I think is a lot more comfortable for a lot of people. So it really depends on, what you want to do at your table. And really, I think that's, what Pinnacle really delivers when they do this kind of stuff is they really give you kind of the seeds and the hooks, and you can adjust those dials as much as you want to really get it right. Because I mean, if I ran the game, I grew up watching things like The Mummy and Indiana Jones and stuff, so that's kind of where my horror lies. Whereas if my wife was in the game, she grew up watching Carrie and It and things, so I'm gonna guess that that's gonna be way more on the creepy side, right? So so you can basically adjust it as is. But yeah, the adventure itself, I think, really lends to, you being able to adjust that dial. But, the standard adventure and where it takes you and stuff isn't necessarily super horror. It's not a 10 candles-y.
It's like spooky.
It's not baked in the way that it is
right.
in like horror at Headstone. There's a little bit more baked in there.
Yes,
because there's no horror in the title. I mean, the minute it says horror in the title,
yeah, you expect,
No, it
this
isn't.
wasn't the red flag you were looking for.
Exactly. And I think so. You can get the Foundry VTT on Pinnacle's website, I believe.
Yes.
You can check it out there.
And the Roll20 version is also released. That released before the Foundry one. So, yeah.
But Foundry, Roll20.
Pick your poison. Pros and cons.
Ellen had the Freudian slip, right? She said it was the final VTT, right? Yeah. And then corrected herself to Foundry. But we all know the truth. No, I'm just kidding. For all you Roll20 listeners out there, I apologize.
I don't.
Wonderful.
You're terrible.
I used
don't
it for
play
years.
it anymore. No, I'm kidding. Everyone loves everything.
I used it for years. I actually have a lifetime pro account, but I did buy Foundry, so that just kind of shows you where you should be.
Roll20 never worked for me, but I mean, everybody should be playing the games the way they want to play. So
exactly,
if that's Roll20, then go for it.
I have done it all. I have run Roll20. I have run Foundry VTT. I have run via Discord with SavageBot, right? I have done all of it. So, and I actually know the developer of SavageBot. So.
Oh, cool.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so a lot of the improvements were basically my requests, because we added him to my play-by-post server for a Rippers game, and we were like, "Hey, we need it to do XYZ." Oh, okay. Cool. Well, let me code that in.
Cool. So yeah, Pinnacle Entertainment Group, peginc.com. You can find out the Foundry VTT there for sure, as well as the other one.
You can also check out on Peg Inc. There's another release coming up. The Savage Worlds Pathfinder is now available to Roll20 add-on backers, and you can still add that to your order through the backer kit, which is available on Peg Inc. The public release is coming. Stay tuned for that, but we can't give you an actual date right now.
Since it's Halloween season, I think looming is the appropriate.
There we go.
Right?
It's looming. The public release is looming.
Yeah, like where you're trying to sew into that big thing with all the wool. That's looming, right? Isn't it? Where you're just using that big wooden thing. No.
Indeed, that is a loom. Yes.
But that's right. And again, I mean, the people amongst us who backed early, they get their reward. They're doing the smart thing. We all did, right? All three of us here did the.
Indeed.
What else do we have, Ellen?
I think those are the big releases we have right now.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a lot of exciting stuff coming up. We can't really give deadlines and things like that, because as soon as you say a deadline before the thing is actually packaged and ready to go, then you guarantee you're going to miss it.
This is true.
Yeah. We
have previously, this was now a few weeks ago, but again, for backers of S5E, the Sigil Kickstarter, you should have received your playtest version of the book. And there's actually a number of people kicking around the Discord looking to start up games. So if you're looking to join in on one of those, S5E Games, make sure you join the Discord. for Sigil. You can find it through the website, or you can just, I mean, Discords are easier and easier to find. I remember when it first started, they were really obtuse to try to join. Now they're becoming more prominent. I believe the link is in the description of this video, in fact.
Yeah.
And get in on an S5e game, because it's fantastic to feel like you have superpowers. You can just blast people with ice. You can turn people to fire. You can do a number of different things. And if you're curious how it plays, again, highly recommend on this channel, you can check out the 10-part campaign that I ran for S5e with the same group of people that I'm using in Hereafter. I'm using them. I'm using these players. No, the same fantastic players that were in that campaign are also in the Hereafter one. But we did a great sort of run through, I think, of all of the various ways you can run that system. We did sort of the more introspective, character-driven stories where we showed, you know, how each superhero came to be, as well as the overarching, you know, city in peril type storylines, as well as had a fun guest star, Noah Avernot. Noah joined us. And I apologize, no, he's not watching this. But anyway, from Star Trek Discovery, he joined us for episode 6, I believe. So that was a lot of fun too. So check that out if you're interested, and join the Discord and get in on a game if you want to be a superhero. Who doesn't really, you know?
Superhero games are amazing.
What's your superpower, Joe? If you could pick.
My superpower is probably getting releases out the door, probably. But you know,
if you could pick, yeah, that's a great way to put it.
But if I could pick, you know, as much as I would want to say fly, because flying would be awesome, I think it would be super strength, because, you know, there is nothing more awesome than, you know, just like picking up a bus, right?
Absolutely.
Like, that's got to be cool.
And you do it so often for no reason. You just be like,
exactly,
oh, did you guys need this bus moved?
You know,
I got it, don't worry.
Out of the way. Let me get out of the way. I got to get my kids to school. Excuse me.
Like, Joe, we don't need the bus moved. You're like, I can do it. Just, guys, I can do it.
Let me help you with that parking job. Like,
that's my jam, right?
Absolutely. Oh, I would show off my superpower as much as I can, to everyone's annoyance. But
indeed.
So yeah,
you know, that was probably the one downside of the hero show, right? I'm like, I would never hide. I would totally, you know, I would definitely be. What's the guy in Mystery Men that gets captured with all the logos on there? Yeah, you know.
Yeah,
label me up, right? Like
Greg Kinnear. I can't remember his name.
Greg Kinnear, yes. Yeah, I can't remember what his superhero name was.
Me neither.
But,
it was something funny and ironic. But yeah, that would be me too. So that is it, I think, for major VTT releases, as well as the S5e history and stuff like that. And this is normally where we would bring Joe on, but since he's already here, hi, welcome, Joe. And why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about what you do in the scope of Sigil, and then, you know, anything else that you might be working on currently that you're excited about.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'd probably classify myself, and I hate to bring in a sports reference, but I'm probably the floating free safety of VTT development. So I pretty much do whatever needs to be done and jump in and take care of it from there. But mainly I focus on the infrastructure. I set up all the build environments, and I get all the instances set up so that, you know, we can actually develop and have all of our teams go through and put together the content. I manage a lot of the issue tracking and kind of the day-to-day management of the, you know, process and getting the projects out the door, and you know, hopefully catch all the various little holes that need to be plugged and things like that to get a project to completion. My day job is the same thing. I work for a, you know, giant corporation and release, you know, hundreds of products per year. So it's kind of in my wheelhouse. So, you know, when I came to Sigil and started doing this stuff, it just kind of fell in. You know, current projects, you know, we're working on various things. I don't know exactly what I'm allowed to say. You know,
it's hard to figure it out. I mean, obviously, like things that are on the docket. You guys, it's publicly available. We have a standing relationship with PEG.
Right.
What?
Yeah.
There's more things in the Savage Worlds Pathfinder partnership that are going to get conversions. I think that's, but we can't talk about like what the actual priority list is very much, because as soon as you say something like that, then things change.
So I can tease that one of the products that I work on is in QA right now, which means that's kind of on the tail end. So, you know.
Yeah, there should be
so there should be things looming, right? we can do that. Right? You know, there are things looming. You know, and I am I'm very, very busy, which means that lots of things are churning right now. So there are lots of things in the pipeline. To get on my marketing hat, there are lots of things in the pipeline currently, and
there's a lot happening.
There is actually quite a bit. Leveraging synergies and embracing
synergies.
So
reticulating.
So I have been in software development for a couple decades now, and one of the things that we did was we used to laugh that we'd go to a meeting and we would say, whoever, the first guy that says leverage or synergy, basically has to buy us a beer, right?
Yeah.
We tell them that, like, if you say this in a meeting, like, because you're making up stuff for silly reasons, like nobody actually uses that in their daily lingo, right?
No, exactly.
This is totally marketing canned stuff. So they actually asked me to come up with a mission statement for my team. And so I said, so me and my buddy got together and we came up with creating synergies by leveraging, what was it?
Oh my God.
Leveraging synergies by embracing change or something. But we came up with like the most ridiculous marketing tagline ever. And I had it as my email thread until like the company finally said, no, you have to use the corporate one. But it was like 17 years I had that thing on there. Right? And people were like, how did you get that? How did you get that approved? I'm like, I don't know. I just,
because it means nothing, but it looks professional.
Because it means nothing, but it sounds really important.
100%. That's fantastic. So focusing on the VTT world, and let's take it back for a second, pretending that some of the people that might be watching this are either new to the world of VTT or don't even understand what VTT means. Obviously, it's virtual tabletop for those who are unaware. But what is the main advantage to you in using a VTT?
It's kind of interesting because I grew up. I've been doing this. Geez, I don't want to date myself here, but I believe I have been running games for over 35 years, which dates myself a little bit. Nah, you guys probably weren't even born yet, but that's okay.
Oh, no, I was.
So, when we played, on the tabletop, you draw out your maps and you got to draw them and everybody's waiting and sitting around and the game kind of stalls out and loses interest and things like that, right? And then it was like, oh, well, now I can find all these maps online, but then how do I get them on the table? Do I print them out? I don't have a plotter, right? I don't have this. So I print them out on individual pieces of paper and I tape them together and I throw all this stuff on, and I mean, I guess if you're into arts and crafts and stuff like that, or if you're Carl Kiesler, like that's your jam. But like, me, I got 4 kids, I've got a job, like, I just don't have the time to do that. So VTTs, whether you're playing remotely, right? Like, or whatever, it's like just the prep time, right? The fact that like I can grab a map and I can upload it, or if I buy content, it's already mapped and lighted and ready to go, right? Like I don't have to do any of it, right? I got a spooky cave that I got to drop my rippers in, or boom, drop it in, right? If I have a dusty town where we're gonna have a duel at high noon and I need the Western Street so I can have the guys up there, and because we got the one guy that's like, I'm gonna interfere in the duel, so I'm gonna have my sniper rifle up in the clock tower, right? Like I can grab that map and I can drop that in, right? And I can say, well, we're not gonna do it at high noon because the guy didn't show. We're gonna set it at dusk and adjust the lights, and those things, they add that immersion that is really hard to get at the table, so especially, if we're going to step into like, running a horror game, right? If you want to run a horror game, like if you read any blog or anything like that, the first thing they do is, set the mood, right? You want to dim the lights and do all that stuff, and
absolutely, especially with like those creeping, like you mentioned,
that creepy that have some music, like I ran a game last Halloween on Foundry and I did a Rippers game, which is like Deadlands, it's got a very horror vibe, right? And they were going through some caverns and there were some hopping vampires in there, which are like the creepiest thing ever because they're feral vampires that can literally leap like 30 feet at a time, right? So super sketchy.
Leaping
right?
over hopping, because there's a big difference. Because I have seen the hopping vampires, the like Korean cinema hopping vampires.
Yeah, well, that's what it is. It's the hopping vampires, right?
Okay,
like,
good.
Like,
just
they hop everywhere, stuff like that, right? And of course, I do all the stuff. They're crawling across the ceiling and stuff like that, right? And but if I did that at the tabletop, it's like I could describe that, and hopefully, like I can get it across. But maybe not. But in a VTT, they're in the cave. I zoomed it way in, so the there's only, you can only see the party and maybe
fog of war in there.
maybe 10 squares ahead at most, right? And it's dark, the shadows are all in, the lighting's in, and then you have this creepy, music just kind of in the background, just a little bit, right? And that just sets the mood, right? And so you can do that on your table. You can do that. I mean, when I run games at home, I just throw Foundry up on the TV, right? And everybody's sitting in the living room, right? And they're, and I let them roll their dice, and they can have their character sheets. And one guy, he does it all digital, right?
That's cool.
He's got his laptop and he rolls his dice and they go up on the screen.
I've seen some people do like the TV on the table,
We've done that.
So I've done the TV on the table, and there's actually modules. There's a guy working on a module where you can put the RFID chip. So if you have a touch screen TV, you can actually put an actual mini on the table, and it'll move the token underneath it.
I'm really excited for that. I think that'll be so cool.
So me, because I'm a fat guy at heart, right? I like the TV up. So even when we played, dating myself, I even used, God forbid, Roll20. Like I used Roll20 back in the day, right? And we would just take a TV and put it on the kitchen table. And we had one guy that played on the East Coast because I'm in California, and so we had literally a Chromebook set up with his face on it with a camera, so he could see everything, and then he could log into Roll20 and see the map and everything, and then. But the beauty was then all the foods and drinks and character sheets and dice are all on the table, and you don't have to worry about like rolling across the mat or rolling through a mini or all that stuff.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I think is kind of a transitory shift that I see, right, especially as a busy parent, is the fact that when I use a VTT, I can play for 2 hours. I don't, I don't have to have this like, well, if I'm doing this, it's got to be a 5-hour investment because it's going to take me 45 minutes to set everything up, right? To set up my GM screen, to lay out my map, to put out my minis, to sort the guys for the adventure coming up, right? And if someone goes sideways, right? Like, all right, we're going to go down into this layer. So I got my vampires, I got this, I got that. And then they're like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to go shoot out with, Billy over there because, he said something that you thought was funny in the bar and it offended me personally. And we're doing this now. So then the whole adventure changes, right? Which is what happens to everybody. Anybody that's ever GM knows that that's what happens, right?
Absolutely.
And so, in a VTT, it's, let me grab this map of the town and we'll drag these actors out because they're all statted and ready to go. And I don't have to go dig through my notes to find it. And it's there, right? And just other stuff is just the convenience of looking up rules, right? Because, the guy's going to grapple, right? You're a gunslinger. Yeah, I'm going to tackle him. I'm going to grapple him. Like, okay, but you have like a D4 in athletics. You really want to do that? And it's like, okay, I got to go look up the grappling rules. Well, in a VTT, that's, a quick click and it's all cross-linked and referenced and you have all of those rules for you at the tip of your hand.
The math is nice too. When you're doing that, it's not everybody sitting there being like, oh God, the rogue rolled sneak attack. What are we doing now? We're just going to do math for 20 minutes. No, it's just there.
Yeah, you can put in whatever you want, right? Or, and Savage Worlds is really big. And if you haven't figured it out, I'm a huge Savage Worlds fan. It's all I run and play. So, but, they say like, hey, some of these modifiers, we're not going to give you explicit modifiers for everything. There's some, but there's also that, if you think it's slippery, then they have a -2 to their athletics roll, or you make it, you decide if they're trying to cross a waterfall, maybe it's -4, but you just decide those numbers as a GM, right? And so it really, is helpful in a VTT to be able to just say, yeah, this is -2, just punch it in, right?
Cool.
And then it just calculates all the maths for you. It handles your wounds, your fatigue, right? It tracks your power points, right? All of those little things that like normally you had to have a counter for, or I got my D20 that has my power points listed or my spells or whatever. And then somebody, friggin' hits my die and then it switches over to a 5, right? And it's like, no, dude, I swear I had 17 power points. No, dude, you got 5.
Well, that's it too. And I think there's something nice to be said about a lot of people look at these as you have to do it all too. Like, I think it's wonderful because VTT is not something that you have to go entirely into with the micros and all that kind of stuff. You can literally just use the maps or the Fog of War and still, like, I kind of have a hodgepodge myself. I use Foundry. I use it for the maps and placements, but I do all my rolling, on the table.
At the table.
And my stat blocks, I keep them all here. I don't punch any information into there just because that's how my brain works. I can be doing two things at once. But a lot of people, whereas if you're at the table, it's all, it's so much tougher to try to be balancing those two things.
Yeah. So for me, it's like, I want the convenience. So I love like the premium content we put together because it has all the rules and all the links and stuff like that. So you can link through to get to what you need, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, we're going to do a chase. I can just share the rules so everybody knows what's going on, right? And then, and that's easy. But at the same time, it's like, I don't want a whole bunch of automation because, I might tweak something a little bit, right? I might change this up a little bit, right? So, I did one where, it was a fantasy game, right? I ran it for a bunch of kids and they went into a room and it was like, the one room was ice and one room was fire, very superhero-y type thing or fantasy, right? And when they came into the fire room, there's lava in between, floating pillars of rocks. And then there was a statue that basically was holding a shield and it held the gem that they needed, to steal in the other hand. And they basically had to pull a sword out of the pillar they were on and get across leap across these fiery pillars to get across. Right. And it's like, okay, pretty simple. And by the rules, you could do different rules, how you wanted to do it. And I kind of did sort of a dramatic task, but then they had to make athletics rolls and every success and raise, they could jump across one pillar, right. To one of these platforms. And then if they ever got a club, right, it was a complication like a chase, so I'm using little tidbits of the different rules, then that floating thing would crack and dissolve into the lava and it would go away. So they had to make an athletics roll at a -4 to make it to the next one or they fell in the lava. Oh, no. Right. And then if they chose, because, one of the things is you can always choose not to act. I'm going to stay on this pillar because one group was like, oh, well, I'm going to set up like a row of people and just toss the sword across, fireman style. Right. Which is a genius idea. But if they stayed on one and didn't move, then lava goblins crawled out and started attacking them, right? Wow. So they had to keep moving. And so, and it's like that, if it was a hard set rule of this is a chase or this is a dramatic task or this is this, there was no way I'd be able to run that. And if I was locked in with those rules in the VTT, like a video game, it's that whole, oh, I want to go do this. Oh, you can't do that because the video game didn't program that. And it's like, and really for me, you want that hybrid where it's like, I really want the feel of a table and the ability to do it. I want it to roll my dice if I need to, right? I want it to, keep track of numbers, right? If I take a wound and I track it, like just put that in there. I want to keep track of PowerPoints and stuff. And I want to have my rules referenced. But at the end of the day, like I want to, as a GM, to be able to tweak things and munge it the way I want, right? Yeah. And with Foundry, I could absolutely run that exact situation, in Foundry, right? That's cool. And it works really well. So
and Roll20.
And Roll20, right? You can do Roll20. Sorry, I don't want to poo-poo on Roll20. I used it for a decade, right?
Yeah.
So,
but used. You obviously migrated for a reason.
Oh, I did.
Like, I'm just teasing.
No. So what it boiled down to, for me, was, because I'm a software developer, it was the ability, like the API is very limited in Roll20. Like you can do some things, and I have the pro account. So I had the, wonderful initiative, update that automatically dealt, the cards and sorted them the right way and did all the right stuff for everybody and took care of, whether you had level-headed or quick or, hesitant and all that stuff, right? And that was an API. If you don't have the paid version, like that's a manual step you have to do. That, once again, that's the downside of VTTs, is like, it's not as easy as just dealing out cards that everybody is intuitive with, right? There's that kind of learning process that you have to do. And so the more that the VTT can kind of get that out of the way, right? My character has these things, I check these boxes, and then I deal combat, and then it goes out, right? So like I know like Christian Serrano and Flo put together, group initiative, which was missing in Savage Worlds, and that's huge to be able to group, because you kind of group extras together in one group and you get them one card, right? And that's a Savage Worldsy thing. And VTTs, once again, that was always hard. So it's like, oh well, I only add this one guy to initiative. But it makes it hard for the GM to go, well, I have 10 goblins on the page. which one went, which one didn't. Now I got to mentally keep track of that. So the more I can make that easy, now I have a list and I can just step through the list because they're all acting on one card. So those are the things where I think VTTs can help improve that. And
I don't think there's anything wrong either to say that Foundry does it better. Like, I know you were always worried about offending the Roll20 crowd or whatever, but I think
and that's it. I mean, that's Christian was the one that bumped me over. He's like, oh, you got to try it, and so I moved over and tried it. And the first day I wrote macros so that I could select large groups of people and shake them, or add a status. They're distracted, they're vulnerable, because once again, I like playing like I'm at the table. I don't want a whole lot of automation, right? Mm-hmm. I'm more of a I'm jamming and it's like, okay, you did this. Okay, these guys are distracted. I can drag select them. I can hit a distracted token and then boom, they're all distracted, right? And it puts a little token on them and it marks them distracted. And that's, an hour of JavaScript to write up, right? And that's something that you can do in Foundry that you can't easily do in Roll20. So
I think that's really like the thing I hear over and over again from people who move to Foundry is they're people who are comfortable. They want to get into the modules. They want to get into that level of customization in their games. And they are, even when they were on Roll20, they're hitting the limits of what Roll20 can do. And so they're after that freedom. And the people who are interested in a very clean, like, all I want to do is just here's my map, here's my tokens. Like, they don't necessarily take advantage of all of those things. And so Roll20 is a perfectly fine solution for them. And again, play the game you want to play. Foundry happens to work for the way we all play,
right?
But I mean, part of that is like, I don't know that I would have made the jump to Foundry, except that my GM is the developer of the system, is one of the main developers on the system that we play. Like, so we get a lot of custom.
So you kind of had to.
Well, yeah, but we get a lot, so we get a lot of good support for it, but it's also things like the animated maps and tokens that Foundry could support and Roll20 can't. Is like that's really, really cool. And
well, that is I was going to say that the just explosion of modules and just the crazy customizations you can do is insane, and I don't use any of it, right? like I'm like a 12 module person, and most of it is the premium content we put together, right?
No, but then we run with like 100 modules, like
right. Well, that was like I was helping Cheyenne before one of his games, and I was like going through something, and he's like, "Oh, can you take a look at this?" And I looked, and he had 162 modules load up, and it was like crazy.
Are they all like actually active? Or just I
don't even know. I think he had over 100 active. I think 102 were active or something like that. But but he uses like 3 of them so that when he casts a bolt, it literally shoots something across the screen and hits the targeted person, makes like an effect, and it does a different effect whether they're hit or they're wounded or whatever. And it's like it's really slick, and you can do all that. And I think, while that's awesome, I think that's also what kind of scares people when they go down the rabbit hole, because like they look at that and they go, well, I want that. And it's like, yeah, but that required like a week of work from a guy that drew all the art for it and then pushed it in and did all that, right? Because this stuff is work, right? It's not easy to just, throw this stuff together.
If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. What are your thoughts? Right? Joe, do you have any thoughts? And Alan, for that matter. And there's been some rumblings of Wizards of the Coast. They've recently begun hiring a ton of artists specifically geared towards VTT. Do you have any thoughts on, basically people are thinking that D&D and Wizards of the Coast are starting to move into their own VTT territory. Any thoughts on that, or just out of curiosity, because it just came up?
I mean, they've been trying for 10 years to do that, right? I mean, I remember when Roll20 was coming out, like, oh, they're going to come up with their own VTT. I mean, I think even with 4E, they were actually talking about gonna have a digital VTT, and then it just never came to fruition. They had like the character builder, and then that was it. I mean, and when did 4E come out? I mean, that was 2005.
That was a while ago.
2006.
I mean, it is
I'm not a D&D guy, so I don't know. Like, I remember it coming out. I played it once, and I felt like I was playing World of Warcraft, the board game. When I played 4E, like that's what it reminded me of.
That's
like
exactly. So
4E is very
I
much a thing.
started playing tabletop RPGs during 4E, and when we went into our game store, because my dad used to play AD&D, and so when we went in, and we were like, okay, what's the latest version of D&D? We know they do things. They were like, no, you don't want 4E. So they kind of forced us to go play Pathfinder for several years because they were like, no, you don't want 4E. Stop it. But
for good reasons.
Yeah,
but yeah,
so,
I was just curious if you had any thoughts on it. Dungeons and Dragons Digital is sort of the brand they're going with now, and again, they're filling a whole bunch of positions. It just came out maybe 3 days ago. They started announcing all these big things. But mind you, Wizards of the Coast can't do anything else really well.
I mean,
I don't know if they know like 100% what they're doing.
All their video games, terrible.
I mean, I think they realized, well, Baldur's Gate was awesome.
Baldur's Gate, yeah, that's true, but
Baldur's Gate was awesome.
That's fair.
It made me want to play D&D as someone that had never played D&D before.
Sword Coast something Legends was absolute garbage. Then they just did that Legend of Drizzt multiplayer game, which was absolute garbage. You're right, though. I forgot about Baldur's Gate, and Baldur's Gate 3 is coming out, and that looks awesome too. So who knows? Anyway, I was just curious. With YouTube being
with the VTT stuff, I mean, I could see them coming out with their own VTT because they can do whatever they want, right? The question is does it make the most sense? Because most people that are gamers, right? They play lots of games. Like they're not like me that hide behind my Savage Worlds, and just stay there. I mean, maybe D&D might be in the same boat. There's a lot of people that just play D&D 5e, right? They only play 5e. They only play fantasy. They don't stretch out. But I think the people that like invest in the hobby, like they end up branching out, right? I mean, I played D&D. I played Powered by the Apocalypse. I played the original Rifts. I've played all the old Palladium stuff, right?
I feel like of the people I know who play like, nope, this is their system. Like there are people who have like, this is my favorite system. Like everyone has okay, I want something that I'm not going to work too hard. Like you have a system for that.
Right.
But I know more people who do exclusively D&D or Pathfinder than any other system. Like there are definitely people who are like, nope, all I do is D&D. Moreover, I just do this version of D&D.
Yeah.
And so there is that, but I do find increasingly as soon as you play something other than D&D, even if it's just I play D&D and Pathfinder, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, and you also play these like 8 other systems. Like you've either tried them or you want to try them if somebody you trust will GM them for you. Like, and so but there are a lot of people who are exclusive D&D, and I think if Wizards of the Coast does do something and they start like really trying to invest in that VTT space, there'll definitely be an effect, like a ripple effect across the rest of the ecosystems. Like they have so much weight to throw around.
Oh yeah.
But it's just kind of a matter of how do they want to play in that
space. This would have been my sort of follow-up question. What I was most interested in, and from both of you, is there anything glaringly obvious that they could do differently or better to a VTT that would make you go, oh, that maybe wouldn't be able to be implemented in a Foundry or Roll20 without rebuilding it from the ground up? You know what I mean?
Well, not rebuilding it from the ground up, but I think that, for average, entry-level player, right? Because the downside of all of these VTTs coming in is you kind of have to know what you're doing, right?
Yeah,
there's always that
There
complex.
is
they're
a
complex, right? And realistically, if they built something, and they would have to build it from the ground up to do this, but if they built it from the ground up so that it was only for D&D, because the other downside of something like Foundry or Roll20 or this is like they're trying to be generic to support n number of systems, right? Yeah. If I build it so that like, hey, this is for D&D 5e, it only does D&D 5e, right? It only plugs in our adventures. It only does this, right? While that's limiting, right? You're not, the people that come in, if it writes up a tutorial that walks you through the entry adventure that's in, whatever book. Like I said, I don't play D&D, but if there's like an entry level, something of the Horde
Lost
Queen,
Minds of Fendelver is like the introduction adventure.
So if that was part of the thing that you bought, and instead of having you run it as a GM, it kind of ran you through the first section of that, and literally like Baldur's Gate says, oh, this is how you sneak. You roll your stealth, and it pops up your character sheet, tells you to click here, and kind of walks you through that navigation. Those kind of things could be huge. right?
Yeah.
Because that's something that, like, I don't know anything about this. I want to play, right? Because that's what we see all the time in, the Foundry Discord, right? It's like, I want to play, right? I
don't
have
know
the book.
how.
I bought this Foundry VTT. I installed it, and I have a grid sitting in my face, and I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Right. And we can do videos till we're blue in the face. Right. And it might help. Right. Like, here, I'm going to walk you through this. I'm going to show you these things. I could do that right now. Like, I
It
can
is
show you
better
where
than
all
it
the stuff
was
is.
6 months ago, but it's
It
not
is.
a great onboarding process even
Exactly.
now.
Right. And I think, like I said, our premium content helps. Right. I've seen, the 5e content. If you know 5e and you know how that stuff works, you know how to play the game, it's pretty simple. But, like, even little things, right? Like, if you're a player, like, when I ran my Halloween game, this guy pointed it out, and everybody I've ever told, no matter how long they've played Foundry, had never heard of it, that if you're a player, if you press C, it opens your character sheet. I had no idea.
I've heard
It's
that.
not in the
I always
hotkey.
forget.
It's not listed anywhere. And that should be, like, seriously, like, as a player, log in, press C. Right? Like, and you have your character sheet. You don't have to go look on the side. You don't have to find your token. You don't have to, like, all you do is press C, whether you have a token on the screen or not. Your character sheet pops up. Right. And those are the kind of things that are, usability features that I think are crucial that people need to know. Right. So that's the first thing I tell everybody. Hey, welcome to my game. Press C, open your character sheet.
C.
Right. Like,
SEE. I'm trying. It's not working. Do I press them all at the same time? Or?
SEA? Yeah.
Which type is C?
Where's the
No, I was just curious because, again, they're this giant Wizards of the Coast, and obviously with you two being a little bit more in there. So
no, there's definitely stuff that they can do, because it would probably just be 5e, or even if they did decide, it would probably just be 5e. I can't really see them going back and trying to support 3.5 at this point.
No.
Or 5.5 they could do.
Yes, or 5.5.
Well, honestly, what I see, if they're doing the hiring sprint now, just if they're going to build something from the ground up, they've also just announced that 2025 is when their new version starts. Exactly. My guess is the other thing that they could swing it for is they can make the game and design it and tweak the rules so that it is easier to run digitally.
So like kind of works with
right.
It for a
There's,
there was
they have more control doing it that way.
So,
and that they also, so one of the things that Foundry and Roll20 and all of that run into by being so system agnostic is there are certain design decisions that they have to make, not even in terms of like the underlying architecture, not just in terms of like how they want to do their UI and stuff like that. Like Foundry works offline, and they put an enormous amount of effort in their development to make sure that it works offline. You don't have to have an internet connection. Yeah. And Wizards of the Coast, because they're just dealing with their own business model, doesn't necessarily have to adhere to that. It's that those sorts of decisions they're working for a single business model, a single vision. And so there's different choices that they can make there that might end up creating a dramatically different product.
Yep. Yeah. But I think, the key is, like, I have a friend, he does the Happy Jacks RPG podcast. I don't know if you guys have ever listened to it. They've been around for years. They talk various tabletop games. He's a big GURPS guy, but he ran a game online, and I think he used Roll20 because it was a long time ago, but he ran it for a group of listeners, right? He's like, oh, like, I'll run this game for listeners. We'll do it online. It was kind of his first online experience. And he's like, you can't run some of these crunchier games online because it takes forever to resolve everything. Right. Like, so he's like, I'm going to write a game that is simple to play and simple to resolve the mechanics. And he made sure that every mechanic was supportable by base dice rolling, right? No fancy mechanics. So you don't have to worry about acing dice or keep this many dice. Like, cause he's like, I love L5R, but like, that's a complicated dice mechanic to code into a game.
Yeah.
Right. Versus like, okay, I'm just going to roll this, I have points in these things. That's how many dice I roll. I can just roll that many D6s, and that's super simple. And, each number that's this or higher is a success that's, baked into every dice rolling program, right? Or gather the sum or whatever. So he basically kind of had 4 tenets for building the system. And he was like, okay, I'm going to make it so that it's easy to run online. It's, low prep and, and things like that. And he specifically did it because of his challenges running at a VTT. And like I said, that was a long time ago, and hopefully with the newer VTTs and some of the things, but those kind of lessons still hold true, right? The more complex your system, the more crunchy your system, that's just another layer of complexity added on to the complexity of learning a VTT.
Yeah.
And it definitely, it compounds, it becomes to the point where you're learning different subsets of something too. And sometimes they can feel almost conflicting at times, where you're kind of like, well, hold on, what am I, what was this part of this part? And it can be daunting.
And some people just don't, they're kind of not anti-tech, but they feel like they're not technical, right?
That's true.
It's like outside of their phone, they don't really, if they can avoid logging onto their computer, they do, right? And so as soon as you say, oh, well, you got to log on and use your browser, and you got to do this, like, whoa, like,
whoa, a browser? I don't know about that. Yeah.
Right. And like for me, it's like, the first thing I did with, when I was looking at Foundry was, can it run on a Chromebook? And, and the reason I did that is I run a lot of kids games, right? I've taught all my kids how to play, right? There's probably pictures floating around of, my 2-year-olds and my 4-year-old playing around my table with little people as the mini, and it's like, because it's a good, I think it's a huge hobby for, not only learning your basic math skills, but just critical thinking, problem solving, like all of those things that, in a fun way that they enjoy. But I mean, my son's 15 now, right? And he actually does some work for us, but he started when he was 3. He started playing Savage Worlds when he was 3 years old, right?
Wow,
and
awesome.
and his first character that he made, I think he was 5 when he made his first character, and he made kind of a Ben 10 knockoff in the Superheroes Companion 1.
Cute.
Right?
Awesome.
And but it's like, for them, it's like, being able to have somewhat simplistic rules to teach them, but also when we went online, it was like, his friends all want to get together and stuff like that, but busy schedules, parents can't get him over, we can't do this. It's like, hey, I'll throw it up. Well, this was long before COVID, but even COVID, right? But I mean, you can't meet people, you can't do ever, right? It's like, well, they have Chromebooks for school, so they can all join.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right. So I need to be able to get something, so that rules out things like Fantasy Grounds, that rules out anything that runs, hardware based, right? Well, yeah, there's Fantasy Grounds, right? And it's super automated, and that's one of the reasons I'm not a huge fan of it, because once again, like I might, take a little bit from here and a little bit from here and put it together, and you can't do that if the rules say, no, it has to be like this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's overrides and checkboxes, but once again,
that was my experience with it too. I remember
that complexity thing, right? Yeah. Well, and to me, the UI was just super non-intuitive. But the thing that really broke it for me was you have to have a PC or you have to have a Linux box and you have to install this app to run it. And it's like, no, I just want to have people connect to a URL, right?
But yeah, and that's awesome about your kids and stuff. My son is 4, and I've got him into role playing while we go on walks and stuff, just sort of here and there. But we cracked out last weekend No Thank You Evil by Monte Cook.
Yep.
I don't know if you played that, but very different little rule systems and counting tokens and stuff like that, and it's so amazing to see them, and again, it's interesting because something like a Foundry VTT could incorporate those rules in that regard too, and that's one of those, again, beautiful things about a system.
And that's kind of the nice thing about being system agnostic, right? Because you might be running D&D 5e for your group, or you might be running Savage Worlds for your group, or you might have Group A that runs, Savage Worlds, and you're a player in a D&D, 5e or whatever, and then you turn around and you want to introduce your kids, but it's like they want to see the pretty graphics and they want it thrown up on the screen just like you do for your friends, right? Yeah. So you're like, oh, okay. Well, you know what? Let me install No Thank You Evil. Let me run that for you, right?
Exactly.
Although, I'll say just run Savage Worlds for him because that's what I do.
What I do is I open Tailspire and I show him that, and then we just play through it, because Tailspire to me is it's not even really a VTT. It's to me, it's more of a graphic. I don't know if you've heard of it or played it or used
I've heard the name, but I don't know what it is.
You pulled it up for me one time. That was the isometric one.
It's really fantastic. It's basically it is a program, but it is a 3D. You build terrain, and to me it looks like Hero Forge. It's as if you're sitting around a table where you're using it. So it doesn't have any of the. I mean, it has the functionality of certain VTTs, like you can roll and you can, add Fog of War and stuff like that. But really, it doesn't emulate playing the game, what it emulates is being at a friend's house and looking at their creation and being like, oh my god, that's amazing. And you can play in it, absolutely, but it's purely like the visceral visual feel of looking at those awesome minis. It scratches that itch for me, which is very different, and I love it.
Well,
really
and that's cool. Like I did, so for that superheroes game for my son, when they were all little, like all my nieces and nephews came, we ended up having 10 players of various characters playing, and they ranged from age, I think my son was 5, and the oldest was 9 or 10. So we had this big group of kids, right?
Oh,
you know, they have a big family, and they built, and they basically captured a superhero base. They were rescuing somebody, and they captured a superhero base, and they took it over. And I said, okay, go build it in Minecraft.
Oh, cool.
And I made them go build it. So they all crammed in the bedroom, and they were in there for like 2 hours. Well, this is where because I said, I described it to you. I told you where everything was. Now go build it.
Oh, that's
so that kind of, and the funny thing is like, they go, oh, that's crazy. But that's what we did. Like if you go back to AD&D, nobody gave you a map, right?
No,
you're
just
had
doing
your
it with a hex
paper,
script.
and you're like, okay, I do this,
Exactly.
right? This is what it looks like, right? Nope, not even close. But that's okay, like because that's what it looks like now.
So cool.
Right?
That's what we have. Yeah.
So yeah, and that kind of stuff is just ways to get people engaged in the game, right? But
hey, start them young. That's the idea.
Yep,
no,
absolutely.
But and more than anything, genuinely, I with my son, it's never really. Obviously, it's not system specific. What we're trying to encourage, and I'm sure you the same way, is creativity. The idea of building stories and dreaming. And he's now at a little preschool age, and he's at school, and he's telling me at lunchtime how they're like exploring the spooky woods in the field, and how the hole is a mystery, and all of these things that are offshoots of the time that we sit out back and we talk about what the vampire and he's running these little games for us, and it's a wonderful, amazing thing. And VTTs in general just make all of that easier for the world to be able to communicate. I think COVID's really changed a lot of that. So many people were thrust into it, which is a positive offshoot of something that was terrible, obviously.
Yes.
But yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, Joe, and thank you for coming on and talking about all of this stuff. And
thank you so much.
All of the upcoming products that obviously you've been helping with in one way or another as well. I mean, these are things that you're not just well, that's what I mean. It's not just tangentially, like you are one of the forces behind this. So thank you so much for coming on and talking about them in this way, so that we get to hear it from the mouths of babes. What does that mean? That's a thing, right? That's like a
I think the mouths of babes means there's no lies. It's just raw truth, right?
So there you go. From the mouths of babe. I'm calling you a babe, Joe.
Hey,
from the mouth of a babe.
My head just got a little bit bigger.
But yeah, I think that is it for today. Thank you again so much, Joe, for coming on and joining us.
Thank you so much.
Hopefully we can have you back again with some more VTT releases to talk about more exciting things and to talk about all the other things. Next time we have you on, showing some stuff too as well. I know you were willing to do it today, but we're at an hour now, and I think that's a good time to leave people wanting more Joe, so that we can come back and talk again.
Okay.
But yeah, that is it from us. Thank you so much, Joe. Appreciate it again, and please like the video, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with another guest for Sigil Spotlight. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.